My name is Sam Drake. I've been running my business for 10 years now. I'm no sales guru, but I've had a lot of sales conversations. I've sold a lot of people on my services, and I feel like I've got some knowledge to share. So, with that being said, I'm just going to give as much sales advice as I can give until I either run out of breath or I can't think of what else to say. So, here we go. First thing is, I used to be afraid to close in sales conversations. I used to think that being the nice guy was the right way to go about it, and it was all about building rapport and making sure that that person felt comfortable with me and just letting them come to the decision themselves. Until I realized that actually pushing for the close is very, very important in sales. Ultimately, you're both there to have a business conversation and figure out if you want to do a transaction or not. And if neither of you are actually going to make a decision and just like take the plunge or make that step, then you're literally just wasting your time. You're having a conversation for the sake of it. And so many conversations happen like this. I feel like, yes, it does help to not be pushy and really hold off on asking the close for some people, but that's a very soft way of selling. And I felt like I was probably losing deals for not pushing for the close. And then also some other deals, I feel like just never actually turned into anything because I never pushed for the close. Also, asking for the close really does uncover why people aren't willing to proceed. So if you never actually have the conversation around that final part of the puzzle, around that final part of the transaction, whether or not you're going to go forward, you don't really understand why that person is hesitant. Maybe it's a price thing, maybe it's a timing thing, maybe it's uncertainty around a certain aspect of your service. But if you never say, "Shall we proceed?" or something similar, you'll never find out. What I like to do to ask for the close is actually ask I pre-position the close. I ask for the close very early on. I say, I basically establish why we're having this conversation, why we're on this call right now, and I say something to the effect of, by the end of this call, I'm going to ask for a decision from you. It's going to be a yes or a no because I don't want you to walk away from here with things to think about. The last thing I want is for you to say, I'm going to go away and think about things because that means that I haven't been able to provide you the information you need in order to make an informed decision. So when we get to the end of this call, I'm going to ask for a yes or a no. And I basically establish it right then and there, because what happens is when we get to the end and they say something like, "Oh, go away and they'll think about it," I come back to that because the very, very first thing that I say, they're not going to have resistance at that point. They don't feel like they're being sold to, but it's a preposition. It's kind of putting it there as almost like a promise that they're giving me. And it's reciprocal promise too. I'm not asking for them to promise me something without me giving them too. So I'm basically promising them I'm going to give them everything that they need on the call. So I like basically put it in the mind that we're going to have that tough part of the conversation at the very end. Another close. So it's funny that the start of this video is talking about the closes, but what I like to do is a sort of double negative close sometimes because it's way easier. And a lot of sales, by the way, is human psychology. So if you want to get really good at sales, I have, well, in fact, I'll put it in the description, the books that I would really recommend for selling, because I never took any courses, but I did read a hell of a lot of books. So I'll put the best sales books in the comments, in the description, sorry. Yes, so psychology. It's easy for somebody to say no to something that it is to say yes. And I'm not just talking about rejecting something, I'm talking about the word no. It's easier to say no. In fact, on a day-to-day basis, we say no to many more things than we say yes to. We say no to things, and it's inbuilt in our brain, in our consciousness, in our psychology to say no because it keeps us safe. If we went around saying yes to things, we would get mugged, we would get hurt, we would end up in a worse situation than before. If you've ever seen the movie Yes Man, you'll kind of understand where I'm coming from. No is a safety mechanism. So you can use no in your sales close to mean yes. So it's a double negative. So you say, would it be ridiculous if we proceed on this? They'll say no because it's easier to say no. So they'll say no to that. Also, it makes them, that's another close as well, is like, would it be crazy? Would it be ridiculous? Would it be stupid if we were to proceed? Because in order for them to say yes, or in order for them to reject you and say yes, it would be like, yes, it would be stupid if we proceeded. Yes, it would be ridiculous if we proceeded. So you basically make it hard for them to reject you at that point, just with the way that you ask. So in many cases, even if they're like, no, it wouldn't be ridiculous, but they're still at least kind of coming around to the idea that yes, they're going to proceed with you. Another close, which is great, is assuming the close. So you have a great conversation. This works when you've built a lot of rapport with the person and you can kind of tell that they're pretty much on board, right? So you've had a really good sales conversation. They don't really have any questions. You can assume the close, which just means like you assume that they are going to be working with you. And your question at the end is rather than, should we proceed? It's something like, when can I book in the onboarding, right? So you just assume that they're already on board with you. At that point, they've got a choice. They'll either just tell you the day, and in fact, you can make it you can make it easier by asking them sort of a different question, which is, let's book in the onboarding. Do you prefer mornings or evenings? Mornings or afternoons? Simply because when you phrase the question like that, the question is not between shall we book the onboarding or shall we not book the onboarding. It's the onboarding is happening, but should it be the morning or should it be the afternoon? And there was a study done which kind of explains this. It's a really simple concept, but on university campuses or college campuses in the US, they had Coke machines and Pepsi machines. And when they position them next to each other, you would expect them to both make less, right? Because there's more competition. But actually, they both made more than when they were positioned separately from each other, because having them together made people ask the question not of, do I want a can of soda right now? It was, which can of soda do I want right now? So the consumer went from even questioning whether they wanted it to already establishing, fine, I want it. Which one do I want? The question just changed and it assumed the close. It ultimately assumed the close. So you can ask this question to them. A massive skill in sales is reading between the lines. So if somebody is not closing or somebody's not willing to go forward, closing is such a funny word, you need to be able to understand what the reason is. They will probably not be able to tell you. Most prospects don't know why they feel the level of uncertainty that they do. It's reasonable. It's human nature. Sometimes things just feel off and you're not really sure why. And maybe you find out days later down the road, weeks later down the road. But in sales and business, you don't really have time to be to operate like that. Maybe your marketing hits on that pain point after the call or before the call. Great, cool. That's more systems than sales, but you need to be able to understand why they're hesitant. That's about as much advice as I can give on that one. I can't tell you any further. Things that you need to be really wary of, like what they say during the call. If they want to go away and think about it, this is the biggest red flag that you can possibly have. This is basically them saying no to you. You need to understand that, because them going away, they ain't coming back. Let me tell you that much. They might, but it's really hard to get their attention. Ultimately, what they're doing is that they're asking for a free pass to basically table this discussion and maybe have it later. And in most cases, they're not really that interested in having it later. If they don't jump at the offer, then it wasn't good enough to close them now. Why should it be good enough to close them in a week from now? You have to give them a hell of a good reason to take action a week later down the road where it's not on their mind. Maybe they've kind of moved away from it a bit. I mean, maybe they felt more like at pain because of what they are experiencing, but the easiest and the best, the most optimal time to sell somebody is during the sales meeting, not a week later when they've gone away and thought about it. And again, going away and thinking about it basically just means that they have a question, they have something in their mind that you haven't been able to address on the call. So you failed on that call. If somebody goes away and thinks about it, you can consider them a no. So I think you should never let them do that. You should always end a call with a no or a yes. If somebody wants to go away and think about it, you have to either get a verbal agreement of like the next time you're going to meet. So you can say something like, okay, great. Let me know when is best for us to schedule a next meeting. And you should put it in the diary there and then. The trouble with that is a lot of people will just put something in the diary with no intention to actually show up for that. So it's not ideal. But if you really cannot just get an answer from them, then that's a good one to go for. Ultimately, if they want to go away and think about it, you should really just persist on getting an answer, even if it kind of ruins the chances of a sale later down the line. It kind of ruins your rapport. Look, either they're going to close or they're not. It doesn't really matter if you get pushy at the end. If they're never going to close, then you might as well. Um, don't do proposals. Um, in my opinion, you shouldn't really be doing proposals for anyone, especially if you've never even spoken to them yet. If they just want a proposal or a quotation for something, they're not serious. They don't know anything about your business. Is it too dark? I'll move the camera a little bit. They're not serious. They look, either they've just reached out to you and they're asking for a proposal already, which just means they don't know anything about your business. You don't know anything about their situation. It's not appropriate for you to suggest anything, and ultimately, matter of fact, it's a waste of your time to be doing that. Or you're in the sale process, and they're asking for a proposal. They're basically like asking for permission to get off the call. I feel like very often when you go away and you do proposals, and like all of this advice, right, is from experience. I wouldn't be saying something that I haven't actually tried myself and come to understand. So when it comes to proposals, don't bother. Like really don't bother, because it just gets ignored. Proposals are pretty much this, like you can have a discussion on the scope and what your project entails on the call, unless you're going to bigger businesses and you need like sign off on multiple stages. You'll need to do a proposal. But what I'm saying is, like, proposals have their place, but it should only be sent to them as a confirmation rather than a proposition. So the proposition happens on the call, but the confirmation happens by email or afterwards, or just by simply signing a contract. Ideally, you don't really need to write a proposal, because your service, what you provide, is singular. It's not copy paste or cookie cutter, but it is the same across clients. It's what happens with inside the scope that changes. So let's say, for example, my business, we do ads, we do social media, organic content. It's like you'll get the same number of ads, the same number of hours worked on your campaigns, everything like that will be the same. But within that time, what we do is a little bit different in terms of what the ads say and who they're targeting, all that stuff. So the proposals, you may feel like, great, that's a positive response. It's really not, because especially nowadays, people are not sitting down to read proposals. In most cases, they're just checking the price. And if you're, speaking to price shoppers, then that's not actually an appropriate lead anyway. Which is another point I want to bring up: is understand when you're not speaking to an appropriate lead. Don't go for meetings that somebody refers you and you instantly say, "Oh, great, they're a referral of this person, so I'm going to go meet them." Or even they find you on social media and they ask for a meeting immediately. You should have a system in place that kind of pre-qualifies them. You should know their pain point and the reason that they're reaching out to you before you go for that meeting. Because if you're going to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours, if you're including travel, to go and meet them and to understand these things from them, or like understand their situation, there's a really good chance that you're immediately off the bat going to understand that they're not ideal for you, and you're going to have wasted your time. And it's hard to like stand up in a meeting and be like, look, I don't think this is right. And if you need to take meetings like that, you have other issues. You have some cash flow issues. You're not in the right situation right now. You're not attracting the right people. You're not educating them enough before your sales meetings. Basically, you need to understand that you're not sat in front of the right person, and it's unethical to sell them something if they're not the right person. You need to let them sell themselves, right? So this ties into the idea of, if whoever's doing the most talking is basically like losing the negotiation, right? When you're talking, you're giving information. You're letting the other person know about your situation. That's why, like, the best tool in a salesperson's playbook is the questions that they ask, because every question unveils the next layer of understanding. It helps the salesperson position the proposition within the frame of the person, the prospect. So letting them sell themselves is asking them questions that open them up and make them aware of the situation, because you can ask some pretty basic questions that make them think about their situation that they've never thought about before. Like, why did you reach out to me at this time? Why is it so important right now that we speak about this? What is it about this service that makes you feel like this will improve your situation? If this was to work out in 6 months down the line, how would things improve for you? These are questions that like really bring the reality forward in their mind. Like, they know that if they think that if they work with you, things will improve. Otherwise, that's what, like, they wouldn't be sat in front of you at that time. But if you really start to build this like mental image in their head, it really helps them basically like create and confirm the idea of working with you or buying your thing. So basically, let them sell themselves. And you do that through asking questions and letting them speak. Bad salespeople talk and they blabber and they talk about their product and their service. But good salespeople shut up and listen and let the prospect talk. Because there's no point blabbering on about your product or service, because all you're talking about is bells and whistles and features. You're probably not talking about outcomes of their situation, because you don't know their situation because you're not listening to them. It makes them feel like they're not understood because you're not listening to them. And listening isn't just about shutting up, it's about being active listening. It's about understanding their situation. And when you explain something about the service, you need to input things about their life that you've understood. Like, they have kids. So, for example, if you're someone who builds a business towards being exitable and sellable, you need to say something along the lines of like, you're building this so that you can free up your time and have more time with the kids. Like, you just make them feel understood. Like, I know it might feel like you're being salesy, but in reality, like, this is just human interaction, and they don't feel that way. They just think that you're just having a chat with them normally, but you are. To be honest, that is what sales is. Like, a lot of people get very weird about sales. Sales isn't weird. Sales is just like helping somebody understand if you can help them. In fact, sales is helping people. If you have a product and service that isn't bad, sales isn't awkward or bad. It's good. It helps them come to the realization that you can help them through working with you. And what you have to offer them is genuinely good. So you shouldn't feel bad about sales. Maybe that's another point. It's like, don't feel awkward about sales. Sales is a good thing. Use the F word is another note I've written down. Depending on how the sales goes, it might be a different F word, but the F word I'm talking about is fair. Fair is a very unfair word to use in sales because it's an arm bender. I don't like to use this a lot because it is a bit harsh, but it's similar to. It's a bit harsh. Whenever you're using the F word, you want to say, would it be fair to say X, Y, and Z? Would it be fair if we did this? Would it be fair X, Y, and Z? And the reason the F word is unfair, because you're basically asking somebody to, if they have a differing opinion to what you're saying, you're basically asking them to say, no, that's unfair, which is a really unfair thing to have to put them in that situation to do. So I try to refrain from this one, but it's a really good one, to be honest. When you understand their situation and their pain points, you can say, so you told me about this, you told me about this. Would it be fair to assume that if we did this, then this would improve? Like, that kind of thing. And it just helps. I don't know. It's a good one, but it's a bit of an unethical one, I feel like. Don't hide your pricing is another note I've got down. So I wouldn't say. I would say have your pricing out there. Maybe not front and center on the website, but when you have a sales meeting, don't get to the part where you show your options and you just don't tell them the prices, and you'll say, well, I'll send you a proposal, I'll send you a quotation. Nah, don't do that, because when they have an objection regarding price, you are not part of that conversation. Ultimately, you want to be able to sit with them and be like, how does this level of investment work for you? And if they have an issue, you can work down the tier. If they're cool with it, you can even just suggest some add-ons. If they're not really sure, like, you can discuss it. If you're hiding your pricing or you're waiting to have that, you don't want, maybe you're avoiding an awkward interaction around pricing. Maybe it's difficult for you to justify your price and say, we charge this much. don't just palm it off till later. You need to have that conversation. Um, Also, if you can get the pricing in really early, not the exact price, but maybe like a ballpark figure, just say, just so you're aware, like this level of investment is between $3,000 and $10,000 per month. Does that sit okay with you? If they say no, you need to just kill the conversation because there's absolutely no point in going ahead and having a sales conversation. Ideally, you shouldn't even be in that conversation if they're not already ready for that. So your prospecting, your marketing, the part where you collect the lead form, they need to already have agreed to the amount that you're stating, right? So otherwise, they're not a qualified lead, and therefore you shouldn't be speaking with them. Which is funny because I had a situation where I had a call with somebody. They signed a form. In fact, sorry, no, they signed my lead form. They said no to the price point, but they still booked a call with me. And I still went ahead with the call. And we got to the price point, or in fact, no, sorry, at the beginning of the thing, I said, hey, I noticed you didn't do this. You didn't say that you're okay with this level of investment. May I ask why? And he said, oh, I forgot what he said, but he said something to the effect of, oh, I was hoping you just give me a discount. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I wrapped up the call then and there. Because, like, bro, what are we doing here? Um, Also, regarding pricing, it's really important that you make sure that they understand the value of what you're offering first. So if they're just like, look, I don't want to spend ages on the call. I just want to see your prices, please. You need to say you don't have to say no. This is something I realize. It's like not everything has to be like a blunt no. We need to do it my way, but you can say, yeah, sure, I'll get to that. Just give me a couple of minutes. I've got a few other slides I'd like to show you first, which really help you understand why it's priced the way it is. Something like that. Like do a roundabout. Sales is kind of like smoke and mirrors. If you're the one answering questions, you're the one under the pressure, let's say. If somebody asks you a question, they are basically they're basically judging you. So, for example, if they say, what accreditation do you have? You do everything you can to not tell them what accreditation you have, because all of a sudden, if you're now answering their question about accreditation, the conversation's flipped. You're no longer asking them questions. They are basically judging you. You basically give them this situation where they can justify, or they have this sort of qualification of which degree, which qualification is acceptable in their mind, which isn't the frame that you want to be in. You'd rather just like dodge the question and understand where the question is coming from, because every question in the prospect's mind has an underlying reason for it, which is an uncertainty. So if you're, for example, being asked about this accreditation, you say, okay, I understand accreditation is important to you. May I ask which accreditation is most important, or may I ask why you're asking about, like, you need to understand where it's coming from, because maybe a certain accreditation implies that you're good in a certain space, meaning they're actually just interested in this approach to what you have. So if you can understand that, then you can reframe what you're talking about. If you get what I mean. So like you're basically redirecting their question to ask them a question. So like if you can just like almost like an airbender, just like take the question and redirect it into a question back at them. That, like, if you can just do that effectively to uncover more information from them, like this is a great skill to have. Okay, another ethical one. Don't recommend anything before you understand their situation completely. That's just baseline. That's like just a rule of thumb. Another one, use downsells or refuse to sell to them to build rapport. Like I said, I was very, very timid about selling and asking for the close early on in my career. I would very often like say, I don't think this is right for you, or I feel like you should go for this. And either and sometimes it would like really build rapport with the person, because like, oh wow, they actually they don't just see me as like money right now. They see me as more as that. They're actually interested in helping me. And in some cases they'll be like, well, do you think you could do that? Or like, well, what if we did it your way? Like, they kind of change their mind. They come around on things. Downselling is also a really good way of building rapport. It's like you're not trying to squeeze them for everything they're worth. You're actually working with them within a budget range that they're willing to work within. So that builds rapport as well, and then they are more likely to probably like upsell a little bit later as well, because you were willing to, come in at a lower price, and you're willing to work up at a later time. Pricing strategy is important. So this isn't necessarily about sales as it is positioning. Apple are incredibly good at price positioning. I'm not talking about, what price point their product is. I'm talking about the options that you have. Like you probably want a bronze, silver, and gold tier, something to that degree. Apple always do this. They have like the baseline iPhone, the iPhone Lite. I think right now they have the 17, the thin one, which is like an upgrade from the 17, and then they have the 17 Pro. So they have this like three-tier system, and I think the laptops have the same. So it's like the Mac Neo, the Mac Air, and then the Mac Pro. And the price points kind of just like walk you up the tiers. What I find is like there'll be people that just come in and they just want the maximum. They just want the highest price thing. So it's actually good to have that one priced kind of high. Almost like you don't want the majority of people to do it because it's kind of a headache for you to do, but you want the price to be priced really high so that if someone does come for it, it's really worth your while. You don't want it to be the most appealing option. You want the middle one to be the most appealing option. You want the bottom one to be at a price where you can comfortably say starting from, and it seems reasonable. And then the one above that is like moderately higher, to the point where the small one doesn't actually make sense because the middle one is so much better for a bit of an increase. If you look at McDonald's fries, you can get the really small fries for like, let's say $1. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but like $1, and then the medium one is like $1.20, and then the large one is like $2, right? So like some people just want the big fries and they're like cool with paying whatever it costs for it. Then you've got people which are like actually looking at the prices, and some people will be on a budget. They'll be like, yeah, I want the small, but then they see the medium and it's actually much bigger, but it's not that much more expensive. That's not because the middle one is a good deal. It's because the lowest one is actually a bit of a bad deal. So that's pricing strategy. Okay, this is the last thing. This is actually Alex Hormozi's framework to sales calls. He calls it closer, CLOSER. So first is clarity. So like, why are they on the call? So you're basically asking them questions about why did you decide to book with me? Why did it become so important that you had to book now? That kind of thing. Then you label. So like you label their problem. From what you've asked them about the clarity, you basically repeat back to them their situation. So that builds a bit of rapport between you. You understand their situation. They understand that you've understood it. O, overview their last attempts. So you understand that, you've worked with this person, this happened, you know, this, that you didn't get the desired outcome because X, Y, and Z. S, sell the vacation, not the plane ticket. Actually, this is a really, really, really good one. Selling the vacation and not the plane ticket is basically talk about the value, talk about the outcome, talk about the future self, their future situation if they were to work with you, rather than the steps it takes to get there. So ignore the bells and whistles of your service. Don't talk about features of the product. Talk about, if you use this consistently, this is where you end up. This is your life in the future. This is how much better your life will be if you work with me. That's the most important thing, by the way. That's like, if I had to only pick one on this thing, I would talk about that. But of course you can't understand that without the prior work of understanding that situation. So this kind of works in a row. E, so closer, ER. We're coming to E now. Explain. So this is where you get into the nitty gritty of like explaining away their concerns. So like, sometimes they won't tell you their concerns. Sometimes they'll ask questions and then you can explain it to them. But other times they won't necessarily tell you the concerns. So explaining the concerns also takes a bit of detective work to understand where the questions are actually coming from. But we spoke about that earlier. And then finally is R, which is reinforce their decision. So this actually, in my opinion, bleeds outside of sales and into service delivery, because your ability to retain a client is also a sales technique. So the sale doesn't end when they sign the contract. The sale continues far into when the engagement happens, which is to repeat good work. So yes, reinforcement. So like also buyer's remorse kicks in. So you need to have a really solid onboarding system if you are onboarding them. All of that needs to look really, really good. You don't want the first buyer's remorse happens in the first 48 hours. You do not want those 48 hours to go to waste. The biggest mistake I've made when signing a client was signing them on a Friday and not speaking to them on a Monday until the Monday, because those 48 hours I just left them to think about what they've just spent their money on. The client is still with us, thankfully. I made sure that the onboarding was really, really good, because I realized by Monday I had left it too long, and they've had all weekend to consider this thing. So guys, that's all I have in terms of sales advice. Hopefully there was something in this video that you found useful. And if you did, please leave a like on this video and subscribe, because I've got more coming just like this one. Cheers.